Gravel e-bikes are gaining massive popularity within the e-bike sphere, so today we are checking out some gravel e-bikes with brands like Specialized and Bulls and Canyon, all sorts of e-bike players investing in getting better gravel e-bikes. You cannot ignore this trend much longer. The reason we think gravel e-bikes are going to be so big is because there are two markets growing in the cycling sphere right now. One of them is, of course, e-bikes. You probably knew that if you're watching this channel. It's expected to be a multi-billion-dollar industry for years to come. But the other big market is gravel. With both of them growing so rapidly, you have to think that this is going to be a massive trend to follow. First of all, the barrier to entry on these bikes is way lower. They're a little less scary to new riders than I think like a highly teched out eMTB sometimes can be. It's also about the style of riding. So the style of riding is going to be a lot more approachable than like a downhill, shredding it up, going over jumps kind of style. Getting a gravel bike opens you up to riding on roads and also hitting some fire roads. In this video, we are going to talk about what a gravel e-bike is. We're going to break that down for you. We're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of getting a gravel e-bike. And of course, we are going to tell you which gravel e-bike you should think about buying. So what is a gravel e-bike? Well, I've got one behind me right now, as it turns out. As you can see, they look a lot like traditional road bikes. It's a rigid frame, you've got drop bars, but there's gonna be some pretty significant differences that set them apart. For one thing, it's an aggressive, more open geometry. You're also gonna have more clearance for bigger tires, usually 38 to 40C on traditional gravel bikes. That's so you can clear mud, but also you can also get more stability from the tire itself. Some companies, like Specialized on their Creo line, which is behind me, also include a dropper seat post so that when you're descending on really rugged trails, you have a little bit more stability and your center of gravity is a little bit lower. Generally, your bottom bracket's going to be a little bit higher as well, so that if you are clearing any rocks or again going through mud, you're not just dragging it through the mud or rocks there. So overall, these bikes are going to be a lot more rugged. They're going to offer a ton of stability, especially for descending down big hills, but they're also extremely versatile. You can use them on roads or on trails, and I would say they're a lot more approachable than maybe some other eMTBs that just have a lot of tech on there, a lot of suspension that might have a couple people shying away from them. So now that we know what an eGravel bike is, generally speaking, let's talk about the pros and cons. Now, probably the main benefit to these gravel e-bikes is their versatility. You can go from road to dirt without having to get off, switch bikes, do anything. They're very versatile. They are incredibly rugged machines who can handle any terrain. Now, you might be asking me or thinking, hey, that sounds a lot like an eMTB. Are you trying to tell me that these things operate like eMTBs? No, absolutely not. These are not eMTBs whatsoever. It's a completely different breed of bike. All that said, I have used my gravel bike, of course on roads and of course on gravel, but also on fire roads and sometimes on some single track. So they do operate on the same trails sometimes as an eMTB would. Now, in some ways, you could see this versatility as a con if you wanted to. Because of the fact that you're able to go on almost any terrain, you are giving up some comfort when you do more intense terrain. So on single track, if you're on an eMTB, obviously you've got the safety and comfort of suspension so that you can go a little bit harder. But on a gravel bike, it is going to be a rougher ride, obviously. So the versatility, it giveth and it taketh away. I would describe them, though, as more versatile than your typical eMTB because of the fact that eMTBs, while they can be used on roads, they're not designed for road usage. Gravel bikes, gravel e-bikes, can be on roads, trails, and they're really designed to do both. Another huge pro that I want to harp on again, we mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, but is that these are really designed for fire road usage. So gravel, yes, is the general term people use, but at least where I live, it's going to be on fire roads is where you're going to use this. Generally speaking, OHV trails, truck trails, stuff like that, are more welcoming for e-bikes. So if you're on a gravel bike, it's going to be much more welcoming and you're going to be really pushing this thing to the limit. Whereas if you're on an eMTB and you're doing fire roads, you're not really taking that as hard as you could. You really want to be on single track trails when you're doing an eMTB ride, in my opinion. Of course, different strokes for different folks, but that's another pro of a gravel e-bike. Another pro to gravel e-bikes, I would say in general, is that there is usually way less of a weight penalty because they are typically suspensionless. Companies are able to keep weight down and offer you even further weight savings with things like full carbon frames and also smaller batteries and motors, because generally the market for these at the moment is endurance athletes, people who want to use these to get in shape or train. Now, of course, this pro, like the other one, comes with a con as well. Smaller batteries and smaller motors means typically you're going to have shorter ride times. Now, this isn't 100% true because most of these motors are putting out lower wattages and they have lower torque. They generally do last a little bit longer, but generally speaking, on something with like a Fazua motor, you're not getting nearly as much mileage as you would on a Bosch motor with a 625 watt hour battery, for instance. Hopefully you're starting to realize with most of these pros and cons, it is really just about what you want personally. There's pros and cons to anything in life. That's a little lesson for you guys, and that is always going to be true with any e-bike too. To figure out if you want to ride a gravel bike, obviously I would recommend riding them, but there's also some great cyclocross and gravel races that you can watch so you can see if you like that style of riding. So let's take a look at who gravel bikes are for and what some of the best ones you can buy are. So who's making great gravel bikes right now? The good news is a lot of people. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you which gravel bike to buy. That decision is up to you, but there are some standout companies at the moment. First of all, you are going to see a lot of stuff in the coming years from Fazua. Fazua is doing incredibly impressive stuff with their Evation motor. Of course, if you're not familiar with Fazua, I do have a video on it, but it is a completely removable battery and motor system that a lot of companies are partnering with at the moment. Bulls has it on their Grinder Evo Lite, which is a great option if you're looking for a gravel bike. It's got a Shimano 105 group set, which is the entry level of professional group sets. It works really well if you want to get involved with any e-gravel racing, and it's also an option that is not going to break the bank. Another great option that is being offered right now is the Cube New Ride. Cube's New Ride bike is a little bit different than a lot of gravel bikes. They have fenders on there, so it's not necessarily for racing, I don't think. It's not going to be something that you're going to compete with. So it's a slightly different option, interesting in my opinion, but having those fenders could be a nice variance for people who don't want to be out there racing and like working out and stuff. They just want to be on some fire roads, on some dirt, but not worry about getting super dirty. I was very excited to see this from Cube, and again, another Fazua partnership. We will see more and more of these. I think one of the ones we're going to see in the near future is going to be from Canyon. They are already offering the Fazua motor on their Canyon Road Lite. They also have a Path Lite model that is just acoustic at this point, as far as I know, as far as when this video is being recorded, but I would not be surprised if we see a gravel option with the Fazua motor coming out. Also, one could argue their Road Lite model with the Fazua motor that I saw at Eurobike is spec'd out for gravel already because they use the Schwalbe G1 tires, so you could probably use that Road Lite on some gravel anyway. My absolute favorite gravel bike, and they are leading the way in most areas of the industry at the moment, but definitely in gravel, is from Specialized. The Turbo Creo Evo line is unbelievable. They used a Specialized SL 1.1 motor. It's 35 Newton meters of torque and 240 watts. I assumed it was going to be about as powerful as the Fazua motor, but it is unbelievably powerful. I mean, it feels to me a lot like a standard e-bike, you know, something with like a Bosch motor, a CX. It's not going to be quite that strong, but I was pretty blown away by the power. Part of the reason I think you get the feeling of more power is it is a full carbon chassis, so it's a very lightweight gravel option. Of course, with Specialized, you are paying a premium because they make very high quality e-bikes, but this bike is incredibly rugged, and you know that that Specialized brand is going to be around for a while, and they are thought leaders, they're industry leaders in general, and they definitely have led the way in terms of gravel bikes. The Turbo Creo is now coming in an expert and a comp model, so you do have a little bit of price range there if you're not looking to spend a ton of money on one of these gravel bikes, but honestly, it's worth it. They are definitely the gravel bike that I have been most impressed by at the moment. My speculation with these bikes, I am sure we're gonna start to see gravel e-bikes from Trek, High Bike, bigger brands like that. I just don't think they can afford not to be developing them, but they are gonna have some catching up to do because the stuff that is out right now is incredible and it is only going to get better. Like this video, you guys, and subscribe to my channel. We will always be talking about industry trends within the e-bike sphere so that you guys can stay up to date. And while you're here, why don't you go watch some more of my videos? All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Enjoy the ride.